Welcome back, everybody, to the final session of this segment of the morning. I am going to take the opportunity to sit down on the stage and have a fireside chat with Rakan Khalid of Intuit, who's going to share his passwordless journey. So if you'd like to take a seat, Rakan, welcome.
Thank you.
As a reminder to everybody, if you'd like to ask a question, please submit it in the app. We'll get to those after we've had our chat. So, Rakan, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Rakan. I lead the product management team at Intuit that builds the identity verification, authentication capabilities in the platform that powers the entire Intuit ecosystem and its family of products. I have the pleasure of and the honor of serving as the Intuit representative on the FIDO Alliance board. Prior to Intuit, I was at eBay on the identity platform. And before that, I was building a password manager solution at Intel Security.
That's great. And tell us a little bit about Intuit as a company.
Yeah, so Intuit is a global financial technology platform. We provide solutions for our customers in the domain of financial management, compliance products, marketing and services products. And we provide these services both for consumers and small business owners, as well as professional tax accountants. We have about 17,000 employees across the globe working relentlessly on this. And last year, we generated about $12 billion in revenue. If you kind of think of in terms of our mission is to power prosperity around the world, and it's just not just a statement. We actually have ways to measure that, and the way that we measure that is through the household savings rates, and for customers who are on our platform, as well as the small business success rate. So, for example, on the savings rate for customers who are on our platform, our goal is to double their savings rate. And for small business owners who are on our platform, our goal is to increase their success rate by 10 points compared to the industry. We have 5 big bets in support of our mission. The first one is around revolutionizing speed to benefit, and that is a fundamental big bet. The goal of that big bet is to really deliver unmatched speed to benefit, deliver modern AI data and authentication capabilities to limit friction for our customers, to build complete confidence when they use our products and services.
So building on that question, can you talk about your products and Intuit and the capabilities to help contextualize the relevance of FIDO authentication? Yeah.
So as I said, we're a global financial technology platform, and we have a diverse group of customers that we support. Small business owners, professional tax accountants, self-employed, consumers. And together we serve about 100 million users globally. All of these customers in total on an annual basis generate about 1.5 billion authentications on an annual basis. For our small business customers, our goal is the capabilities that we provide are helping them get paid faster, helping them pay their employees, helping them make money movement capabilities, banking solutions, finding new customers. And we have about 10 million of those small business customers. When you kind of think about the scale of that, we process about $500 billion or $500 billion of money movement on the platform, about $2 trillion of invoices on the platform, and about $1 billion in working capital that we issue to our customers to help them kind of like run their companies. On the consumer side, we help our consumers save money through our banking products that we have, through our Credit Karma offering. We help them file taxes with complete ease and confidence, and we have about 100 million of those, and we process about $113 billion on annual basis on tax refunds. So when you kind of like think about that, we have about a lot of sensitive information. So in fact, we have about 55,000 financial attributes per customer. and not only are we a custodian of this information, but as I said, like, we move money movement in the order of like, trillions of dollars kind of thing. And so security and making sure that it's also convenient is paramount to us. We just can't over-index on one aspect because we're going to have like impact on customer acquisition or retention and engagement kind of thing. Yet we also cannot relax the security because then we're going to get like ATOs and fraud and all that kind of stuff. And for a company like us, we just can't afford to lose that trust for our customers. So it's imperative that we balance both of those.
So you spoke about your customers being consumers and small businesses specifically. And usability and security both came up in what you just said. What are some of the behaviors that you observe in your customers as it relates to authentication to the services you provide?
Yeah, so I think I'd like to kind of like broadly separate them into two. So if you look at the consumer side, a lot of our customers on, for example, a TurboTax product come in episodically. Makes sense because it's an annual, you use the product on an annual basis when you're filing the taxes. On average, it takes about 3 visits for them to complete taxes. We see about even mix of customers both on the mobile apps as well as on our desktop/mobile web experiences. Because they come in like on an episodic basis, and we have this, and generally people tend to switch devices on a 24 to 36 month kind of like cycle. And the device trust is really, really an important aspect of our risk assessment. And so invariably what will happen is that because they come in on a new device where we don't have that strong trust, we'll step up authentication. And that kind of is a painful experience for them. And so they hate passwords. Those are kind of, on the small business side, these are the businesses who are managing their products on a day in, day out kind of basis. So when you kind of like look at it on an average basis, they log in on 55 times per customer. Now that's an average. There's a lot of customers who will log in daily multiple times on the product. In fact, you'll have accountants who are managing, multiple businesses, and they're switching between like one company to another kind of to manage, and they're switching accounts kind of, so they're authenticating quite often. Because of the kind of, the nature of the product that the small business is, we see an over-index in terms of the users on the web front and less on the mobile apps. It's still there. It's a companion app kind of thing. And we don't typically see them like, on a new device because, again, they're using it day in and day out. It's not an episodic product. And they love passwords, by the way. And the reason they love passwords is because they save it on the autofill browser password. And they can quickly, if you think about like logging in daily, day in and day out, it's super easy to kind of like, use the browser autofill versus getting a push notification or getting an OTP on the code kind of thing, right? The other guys kind of thing on the consumer side, they kind of like it because, they just have to come in like a few times kind of thing. So that's like the kind of like, and so we got to balance like, and serve all of these kind of like different behaviors.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I have experienced both scenarios. I'm sure we all have. And when you're only logging in once or twice a year just to file your taxes, in your case, it's frustrating when you have to go through that reset because you can't remember your password year through year. So that makes total sense. So with that context in mind, why did you embark on a FIDO authentication project, and what's been your journey? Yeah.
So I kind of like touched upon, the reasons for like, embarking on that. So the biggest reason is that we wanted the best of the worlds of security aspect as well as the convenience aspect. The security aspect because, we want to be able to do like multi-factor authentication as much as we can. And currently, like we have the device-bound passkeys, the old classic, UF. And that's, when you kind of like have to use that, customers just need to like, on our mobile apps, just look at the Face ID or Touch ID, and they use it day in and day out kind of thing. So they're like, accustomed, and habit has been kind of like already accustomed. So it's very seamless. It's almost like, it's not in the way of customers. So there's that convenience aspect and the security aspect. Historically, like if you had to move on the pendulum of security convenience on one side, you would actually harm the other side. So if you were trying to be more secure, you would add a lot of friction, right? And if you were trying to over-index in convenience, then you would relax the security side of things. But I don't think that's the case with the passkeys and the FIDO authentication. It gets us the best of both worlds. And again, given the kind of company that we are, it's not unlike a workforce identity system where I have to go and because I have to work, I have to face the friction. I can't do that. In fact, I know from just talking to some of our risk team, because we added some friction, and that was for the bad actors, we actually saw them pivot to other customers. That's actually good. They can pivot off to some other companies, but we don't want the good customers to pivot, and so that's why we want to have a balance of both convenience and security.
Right. That makes absolute sense. So how did you measure the success? You've deployed passkeys. You're rolling them out. How did you measure the success in the context of user experience, which you've talked about as being a priority for Intuit? Maybe we'll start there and we can talk about the other measurements of success.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I forgot to answer your other question, but I'll come back to that question. Let me answer the question around the how do we measure. So there's a number of KPIs that we measure on. One is around the immediate KPI that we can impact from an authentication standpoint, and also the downstream impacts of those in terms of some of the business KPIs and some of our contact center drivers. So the number one KPI is around what is the success of authentication with FIDO. And if you compare our FIDO authentication success rate, which is about 97 to 98%, if you compare it to traditional multi-factor authentication using password plus and OTP, it's around 80%. So there's a 17 to 18 point increase in the success rate. And we know from our measurements and from our data analytics that every 1 point increase in sign-in success rate actually has multi-million dollars of top-line impact. Makes sense because you're getting more people converted and getting into the product, and they can finish off that whatever they came in, whether that was to file taxes or whether that is to get a new subscription and so on and so forth. So that's one metric. The other way that we measure is the time to access the product. I talked about our first big bet, which is revolutionizing speed to benefit. We want to get out of the way, right, and get them access to the core capabilities and benefits of the product. So when we use FIDO authentication, we see up to about 70% decrease in time to sign in, right? So it squarely aligns with our big bet, the first big bet. The second thing is around the customer support contact. We've seen a significant reduction in customer support calls. And by the way, this is something that we continuously monitor, as well as we look at from our product, right? What are some of the detractors and what are some of the drivers? And historically, and even sometimes even right now, the login aspect consistently comes up as one of the reasons customers are either happy or not happy. And so that's something that we actually even measure it at or report at our C staff level as well.
Yeah, I can imagine that had a huge impact, and that's been coming up a number of times this week. I'm sure we've all heard. So that's the user experience, and it sounds like your customers are very happy, and you've made some significant progress in terms of KPIs and business metrics. What about security?
Yeah, so we've certainly seen a dramatic improvement in the security aspect. If you kind of think about, we all get fraud attacks, and the type of company that we are, we do get attacks. We're very good at preventing those things. But if I have to kind of look at historical data, I'd say about 97% of the fraud that would occur, which is again still in like, very low numbers fraud, but 97% is through non-FIDO authentication methods, right? So when you use FIDO, we're preventing like fraud at a very, very drastically high rate.
Yeah, that's really impressive.
And I've got like, my risk teams and asking me, when are we actually deploying? So the FIDO authentication right now is only on the mobile apps. And we want to bring that on to the web experiences through the passkeys, syncable passkeys. And we're aiming to do that, early next year, January.
Okay, so that's a great intro to my next question, which is really, what are your plans to implement syncable passkeys as the next step of your journey?
So we've been doing a significant amount of user research during this time, learning from some of the other companies who have deployed passkeys. But we are, first of all, let me say that we are like deeply invested in FIDO, and the reasons for which I mentioned. And so we started our journey in 2016 on our mobile apps. We actually used a third-party knock S3 authentication suite for their thought leadership, expertise, and resiliency, and so on and so forth. Since that, we've come a long way. We've deployed the classic FIDO authentication UAF on all of our mobile apps. We did actually do a test a year ago on WebAuthn. And then during the test that we were doing, the passkey, syncable passkeys was announced, and we kind of like said, you know what, we're not going to do that. We're fully bought into the world of the syncable passkeys. Again, given the kind of like customer base that we have, who come in episodically and so on and so forth on new devices, and the syncing part is like really beneficial for that. So we've been doing a lot of like research. We've been like kind of experimenting with like how do we kind of like explain the value proposition of passkey. We've been it's just a matter of for us to kind of prioritize on our roadmap. It's not something that's it's a really important thing, but we're going through a a migration of our platform, and we want to build a solid foundation before we kind of like roll out like passkeys. So I expect that to come in sometime early in the January timeframe. Super excited about that.
So this is very new technology, and there's a lot of discussions around how it's evolving. As you were thinking about this internally, did you receive any objections to using passkeys from the people you were talking to internally? And if you did, how did you overcome those challenges?
So I wouldn't necessarily say that our team kind of saw objections, but I would certainly say there were, concerns around it. And the classic concern is the fact that, when you historically have built a solution in the case of like FIDO authentication UA, which is like device bound, and there's a lot of comfort that the key material is actually, just there. It's not going anywhere, right? So that kind of like raised some concerns around the fact that the key material was, going outside of the device. But then I think you have to kind of look at it as an alternative, right? So you want to look at it like, what is the best alternative out there? And do you think that is password plus, so password, which we know is like reusable. We know this problem. We know the OTP over SMS. We know the problems around it. Is that a better alternative compared to a syncable passkey? And that's the way that the way that we looked at it is like, let's not look at it in absolute terms, but look at it as an alternative, and look at it like on a scale, right? And so just making sure that you educate your stakeholders. So for example, if you kind of think about Apple, right, the iCloud keychain where the passkey is stored is always protected by multi-factor authentication on their end, right? The passkey is end-to-end encrypted, right? And so you kind of like talk about like understand what the concerns are and understand and then explain what are the built-in securities that are provided. And I think that's the way that we kind of were able to convince our team. And at the end of the day, you know what, we are a pretty data-backed company, and whenever we launch this, we're going to launch it as an experiment. We do a heavy experimentation, and we have good ways to really understand, like, for a cohort of customers who are using a syncable passkey, what were the pros and cons? If there's concerns around fraud and ATO and somebody stealing it, we'll be able to measure that. Like, we have some baking time that we have, but we'll let the data kind of like decide. But I'm pretty confident, like, based on like what I've heard, we're in a good shape.
That's fantastic. And I think from what I've heard from what you've explained today, you've really met your objectives of improving the user experience while enhancing the security. So I want to thank you for being here today and sharing your journey with us. And really appreciate the fact that Intuit, as one of the thought leaders and first deployers of passkeys, has been such a successful journey for you. So thank you very much, Vikram.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I do see one question on the stream, so I'll ask you another question. Has Intuit taken their workforce to passwordless too?
Yes. We have taken our workforce to passwordless, so we do use the passkey mechanism. It's not really the classic one that you see, like, that is provided by the Apple and the Microsoft and Google. We do it in a different way, but the short answer is that yes, we have 100% passwordless authentication for most of our workforce applications. There are certain applications that are still on password based, but for the vast majority of them, we've moved them to the passkey world. Yeah.
Thank you. We have a couple of minutes left. Does anyone in the audience have a question? Should bring the microphone to you.
Hi. Sorry. I would like to go back to the question of adoption of synced passkeys and to understand exactly how do you measure with respect to what is the current solution that you provide for authentication. I understand it's a combination. There is password plus a step up eventually depending on the level of risk. If the device, that's what I understood at least, depending on whether the device is recognized or not recognized already. Do you consider that when you move into, sync passkeys will not be maybe at the same level than what you have already on mobile, which is device bound? From the perspective of security, but you consider that it will be a step up with respect to what you have on the web. Is that clear, the question?
So if I can maybe recapture your question, is yes, the question that do I consider syncable passkeys to be, can I use it without any step-up authentication when there's a risk that perhaps tells me that you need a step-up authentication?
Well, yes, so let's put it this way. If you don't need a step-up authentication, I suppose you consider that is moving up from a security perspective. But compared to the combination of password plus some step of authentication, you will still consider that is an improvement in security, same level, or?
So we haven't, so let me answer this. Just because we haven't launched, these are some questions that we're still kind of thinking through. I will say that if you kind of consider the NIST guidance on that, right? The NIST guidance on that, at least on the SB 863 for draft version right now, the guidance is that it is considered as an AL2 authenticator, right? Software-based, except the device one was, a hardware-based kind of thing. So we're leaning on the fact that it is going to be a multi-factor authentication that will not require step-up authentication. I can't say for certain if that will be the case for every authentication, right? There may be scenarios where we may need to step up, and it's all a function of like the risk-based aspect of it.
Thank you.
All right, we're at time. Thank you very much again,
Welcome.
Rakan. And
Thank you.
we're going to break now.